Penguin Random House Audio presents The Romantic by William Boyd. Read for you by Kobna Holdbrook-Smith.
Chapter 1. Cashel always claimed that his first memory was of a man in black leading a black horse. A man who, he then suspected, wanted to kill him for some reason. This occurred when he was 4 or 5 or 6 years old, he would vaguely recall, and the encounter took place when he was mooching around late one wintry afternoon in the big copse behind the cottage where he lived in County Cork, Ireland. He heard distant hunting horns and snatched halloos from the fields beyond, and then, closer to hand at the fringes of the copse, out of sight, came a thrashing and snapping of vegetation, of something sizable pushing and forcing its way through the undergrowth. For some reason, Cashel felt fear grow in him and chill his body, and then, wheeling round a substantial stand of holly, came a man leading a horse, a big, muscled, ebony stallion, huffing and blowing, its neck and shoulders clotted with a beige lather. Cashel could smell the tack and the musky, salty whiff of the horse's sweat thickening the air beneath the trees. The tall man holding the reins was in a black, knee-length coat, silver-buttoned, wearing a black top hat that made him seem even taller. His black riding boots were polished to a bright glossiness, with small, blunt silver spurs, Cashel noticed. This was Death, Cashel thought, so he claimed, come to seek him out. Or the man in black was the devil himself. But it wasn't Death, and it wasn't the devil. It was a man leading an exhausted horse through a wood, a square-jawed man with a wide moustache, tobacco brown. "What's your name, little boy?" he asked.
"I'm Cashel, sir."
"Where do you live, Cashel?"
"In the cottage on Glanmire Lane."
"Ah, do you now?"
The man stared intently at him from his great height, and reached out his free hand as if to touch his face, or catch me by the throat, Cashel thought, and strangle me dead. But then the stallion stamped its feet and whinnied, tugging at the reins the horseman held in his gloved left hand.
"He lost a shoe, so I can't hunt," the man said reasonably, as if he owed Cashel an explanation. "I'll give that bastard farrier a kick up the arse, all right." He pronounced the word arse. His accent was strange, Cashel noted. The same as the girls who lived in Stillwell Court. English voices. They didn't speak in the same way as he did or the other people he knew.
"Yes, sir."
"You'd better cut along home, Cashel, old chap," the man went on. "The hunt's coming through, and they might take you for a fox."
"Yes, sir."
Cashel turned and pelted breathlessly home to the cottage, where he lived with his Aunt Elspeth. He found her in the scullery peeling potatoes.
"I've just seen the devil,"
he said, trying to control his panting, and described the man in black, with the wide moustache, leading the giant horse, and the strange accent he had.
"Don't be so silly,"
his aunt said, drying her hands briskly on her apron.
"That'd be one of Sir Guy's friends over from England for the hunting. Don't be a gomeril. The devil's not coming for you yet. No, no."
She laughed quickly to herself.
"He's got plenty more work to do before he comes looking for you, Cashel Greville."
She heaved him up into her arms. She was a tall, strong young woman, kissed his cheek, and took him into the parlour to look out of the window onto the lane. Half a dozen hunters were cantering heedlessly down it, great clods of mud thrown up, spattering from the horses' hooves.
"He was nice to you, this man in the top hat? Was he a nice man?"
"I don't know."
"Did he ask your name?"
"He did."
"Did you tell him?"
"Yes."
"Right, good." "And he asked me where I lived." "And did you tell him that?"
"I did." She set him down on the tiled floor.
"Was that wrong to tell him, Auntie? Come along and have your tea."
Elspeth Souter Cashel's aunt, a Scot from the Dumfries region, was unmarried and in her early 30s. She was an educated woman and governess to the two daughters of Sir Guy and Lady Evangeline Stilwell of Stilwell Court, County Cork, Ireland. The girls were Rosamond, 16, and Hester, 14, and Elspeth had been responsible for their education for almost 10 years now. It was tacitly apparent to everyone that her tenure as governess was coming to its inevitable conclusion as the girls' entry into society approached. Thereafter, there would be no necessity for any more pedagogical refinement. Cashel knew Rosamond and Hester well. They would play with him when he was a toddler, almost as if he were a household pet. Sometimes they would dress him up as a doll, in a frilly skirt and bonnet, or a toy soldier, or a savage aborigine. They were fond of him and kissed and carried him and hugged him a great deal until he grew too rough and ungainly. But the familiarity remained. They had a host of nicknames for him: the Cashel Mite, Cash-Cash-Coo, Cashelnius the Great. They could almost have been older sisters, but for the social distance. Elspeth Souter was staff, after all, and therefore so was her little nephew. Cashel never saw Sir Guy. A remote, almost mythic figure, he seemed always away in Dublin, in London, on the continent, and Cashel never really ventured into the grand salons of the house. He tended to stay in the nursery with the girls. Consequently, he very rarely met Lady Evangeline either, who, it seemed, was always ill, and stayed for months at a time in her suite of rooms on the second floor, attended by a nurse, and receiving weekly visits all year round from old Dr. Killigrew, with his patent medications from the nearby town of Castlemount-Allen. The few glimpses and encounters he managed left him with the impression of someone very stiff and upright, but at the same time very pale and fragile, as thin as paper, he thought, as thin as crumpled wax paper. Once, when Rosamond and Hester were wheeling him around the corridors in a small toy cart, they bumped into Lady Evangeline, fully dressed in a lace headcap and a gown of shimmering ultramarine silk, being helped down the stairs to some social engagement. "Who is this little boy?" she asked Rosamond. "He's Elspeth's charge, Mamma," Rosamond said. "Her little nephew, the orphan, remember?" "I don't recall," Lady Evangeline said vaguely. "Or perhaps I do, now you mention it. The orphan, yes. Is he a well-behaved little boy?" "Oh, yes. He knows that if he misbehaves, we'll give him a good thrashing," Hester said. Lady Evangeline smiled thinly, and the nurse led her carefully down the stairs to the drawing-room. When he was old enough to understand, when he was 5, Aunt Elspeth sat him down and told him the sad story of the deaths of his mother and father, Moira and Finlay Greville, both drowned in 1800 when the packet to Belfast had sunk in a storm in the Irish Sea. There was a small amateur double portrait of a wooden-faced couple set on the mantel of the sitting-room, the only visual record of his parents. "They left on a boat for Belfast before you," Elspeth explained. "You were meant to go with them, but you were sick with the croup, so I was told to follow with you a week later. Thank Lord you didn't go with them." "Was it a shipwreck?" Cashel asked. "Yes, the ship went down with all hands." "What does that mean?" "There were no survivors. Everyone was drowned." Elspeth smiled sadly. "That's how come you're living with me, my darling." She stroked his thick, fair hair, ploughing it with her stiff fingers. "I'll never be your true mother, but in every other shape or form, I'm just as much a mother to you, wee lad. Don't you worry." Elspeth had placed the double portrait in his lap as she gently related the story to him. Cashel looked at the ashen-faced puppets that were meant to be depictions of his mother and father. The man had a dense, spade-like beard. The woman wore a tight bonnet and seemed to stare out of the picture with sightless eyes. "That's Finlay Greville," Elspeth pointed out, "and that's my dear wee sister Moira, bless her soul." "So, if I was on that ship, I'd have drowned it as well, Cashel said.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?